It's so welcomed. You might want to close your eyes or keep them softly focused somewhere. I want to just give an opportunity for us, myself, to acknowledge the land that we occupy. I'm on a lonely land. Just to acknowledge the present day and ancestral stewardship of the regions and indigenous peoples that have been so generous and are present. And taking a moment as you come into your own practice and your own breath, maybe to connect with your own ancestors, calling them into relationship right now with our awareness. Could be spiritual ancestors, cultural ancestors, sheroes and heroes. It's bringing your squad beside you, behind you, all around you, in this opportunity to practice. Inviting your breath where you can to deepen. Maybe taking a fuller few inhales and slower exhales might support you to allow yourselves to settle in, filling up your lungs and exhaling and sighing out even. Maybe we can do that in chorus, silently in ourselves, having 70 plus bodies breathing together across at least the Bay Area, maybe further. And allowing the breath to help us tune into our nervous system in this moment. This might be the first time all day that some of us get an opportunity to come into relation to a quiet moment. Maybe it's one of several. And just meeting ourselves new. How are we doing right now? How's this precious body? What sensations are here? Are there places of tension and tightness, contraction that you can already be present with? And can you invite some softening here? Really inviting us to relax as much as we can in this particular moment. And holding a lot of compassion for places that may not be able to quite soften. Just holding the intention. Whatever has happened for you today, whatever experiences, seeing how we can meet this particular moment as a fresh one with beginner's mind. tracing the breath with our own awareness. The short breath, the long breath, the shallow or deep, however it is in this moment. There's not a way it's supposed to be. We might be supported to feel the earth underneath us, this cushion, the wood, whatever is right there holding our structure up. Letting ourselves feel the groundedness in that. Might support your awareness to also orient to the field of sound, sounds nearby, further away. This might be an anchor that might be more accessible for some of us at this moment. There's a lot happening in the body and mind stream. Know there's a larger space available. And whatever might be floating through the mind stream, just letting the awareness hold that, hold it like a leaf passing through. Any thoughts, experiences coming up, just seeing what we can see, feeling what we can feel, and seeing if we can allow it to pass through. If you find yourself floating along the stream yourself, you found your mindfulness, sati, this place of remembrance, remembering to come back to the present moment. And so I'll be quiet for this next 20 minutes or so, reminding us to anchor in our breath, sensation, the sounds. Bringing kindness and curiosity to all that we experience. Wherever you are in your practice, I invite you to turn towards your heart. Just bring the attention there if it's not there already. You might do that with just your awareness. It might support you to put a hand or palm over your heart. Just gently tuning in. How is this heart right now? Maybe noting if it's shifted, softened, maybe feelings have come up. Maybe it's hard to know what's happening. Just making an intention to connect. Are you recollecting in this moment some appreciation and gratitude for yourself for taking this opportunity to practice, to cultivate your own awareness, calm abiding? This carving out of space during these really intense times to come home to yourself. Maybe holding some gratitude for the health that you might have in this moment, the shelter that you may be able to have to be sheltering in place that's available. For this opportunity to connect to the teachings and Dharma and this practice through this medium, this technology. And any of the ways that generosity might have come up in your own heart and mind just from experiences today. Maybe cultivating some recognition. What moments of sweetness might have met you today? Maybe on a walk, maybe a connection. Maybe this is that moment. And just noticing how the heart responds. Just offer some words of loving kindness. Right? Allow them to be for yourself or for any and all beings. May we be safe and protected. May we be happy and whole. Maybe experience peace in our hearts and minds and liberation. May all beings be happy. May all beings be safe and protected. May all beings be at peace and be free. Soaking the intentions of those thoughts of goodwill, friendliness. Just marinating as much as we can, allowing that to fill our bodies, hearts, minds up. And I think the most, I think, direct way to start would be to really just acknowledge that, um, what a time, what a time on Paramount. I think just every moment I can take to really soak into what this historical moment is revealing, which I don't think I can do in any one moment. I wake up into so many different dimensions of feelings and mind expansion, heart expansion, and contraction as well, right? And of trying to take in the the depth and scope of what we as a species are really grappling with, and what the structures of our kind of um, attempts to stabilize reality, secure and control reality, are undermined by the most um, humblest creatures, most minute creatures, and one of the most ancient creatures, you know? And what it provokes is also one of the most primal urges that is kind of hardwired into our brains and biology, is that of fear. We're here because our ancestors learned to survive based on fear. You're here because of uh, that capacity of a certain type of resilience to move through danger, and um, and recognize that that was really built in to be able to um, work together as a community to safeguard ourselves even more strategically, adapt to the conditions that are changing in environments from all dimensions in kind of prehistoric life, and all the times that we had to face, and from unseen kind of threats to kind of threats from each other, and then also recognizing the emotional threats that come in that also provoke fear. And as I kind of was researching a little bit about fear, um, I recognize there's like an hardwired aspect of us, just like any other deep-seated primary emotion, like fear. Um, Thanks to Inside Out for making that so prevalent in the kind of social emotional learning of our culture. If you haven't seen that animation, highly recommend it. But it's surprising to recognize that one of the most hardwired aspects of fear is not all. It's really, fear is adaptive and conditioned and nurtured by so much cultural conditioning, but that one of the most kind of universal ones is that of loud sounds, right? And that fear is the one that is mostly what comes up for us as like kind of mammals, is to be able to just, like, when you hear the sound of something, that you kind of get that startle response. Like if I did something right now, I'm not going to do it, but Jonesy the cat right behind me would have an immediate response if something dramatic happens. I see it every day, many times, and we can all relate to that. And that's really the main, like, hardwired line of fear. So much else genetically it's conditioned culturally, right? It wouldn't make sense for all of us to be scared of polar bears or tigers, because we would probably be able to sense that kind of ancient threat response, but not everyone was living in those times where they had to face those particular animals and creatures. And I think something about that place where it's interacting with society, this fear is a hardwire. It's a learning. We've learned it and culturally conditioned with it. We're learning something new right now with fear, right? Being indoctrinated with I think a healthy respect of keeping ourselves in social distance, keeping ourselves, washing our hands frequently. There's this fear of potentially of uncertain, this potential paranoia of who has this virus, who doesn't. And I was speaking with some friends and who have kids, and just curious about how their children how they're learning to make sense of this, because there's a certain trauma that is being very much is framing in our nervous systems. And because it's unclear what the timeline for all of this is, we live in a perpetual state where we have to face the uncertainty of these times and fear. regularly. And if you've been inundated with news like me at times, that continues the cycle to keep going. It reifies that layer. And you might notice not only is it overwhelming from a mind aspect, but for me, I can't even hold all the feelings that are coming inside of myself when I take in the news reports. And so I had to learn to distill that, find places where I can metabolize that differently. And so I was like, where can I look in the Buddhadharma and in this Buddhist practices? How has it been approached by the Buddha himself? And so, there's a passage here. This is from, it's a really great book. It's called Mindfulness, A Practical Guide to Awakening by Joseph Goldstein. But this is a passage from the Buddha himself. I mean, translated from Pali, and who knows what's missing in that. But so he's there in the jungle practicing, and he hears things like being knocked off of branches and winds coming through. And this is his thought, I think. What now if this is fear and dread coming? I thought, why do I dwell always expecting fear and dread? What if I subdue that fear and dread while keeping the same posture that I'm in when it comes upon me? While I walked, the fear and dread came upon me. And I neither stood, nor sat, nor lay down till I had subdued that fear and dread. And while I stood, the fear and dread came upon me, and I neither walked, nor sat, nor lay down, till I had subdued that fear and dread. And while I sat, so on and so forth. What he's demonstrating here is, in his experience, he stayed with the fear wherever it was arriving. He didn't move away from it. Right? He stayed with that fear, and there's a huge wisdom that's verifiable in now kind of neuroscience that, in kind of cognitive behavioral therapy of phobias, it's very clear that when you have a snake phobia, any other phobia, that it was once believed that you'd have to do relaxation techniques, you'd have that exposure therapy. We might have all been aware of exposure therapy. You kind of get a little bit more closer. You imagine the thing that you're afraid of, then you kind of imagine it a little closer. So they had these research processes done to having someone say, there's a snake in the room next to you in a cage, person's heart rate and everything would elevate. And what they did was someone would just sit there with them. They would just sit there with them, maybe talk. They wouldn't instruct any relaxation techniques, nothing else, just to be with it. And what they noticed is just doing that alone, just being with it without having to change it, reduced, understandably, the intensity of that fear. And then they said, hey, snake's out of the cage, doors open in the room next door. Oh, here goes the spikes again. Same thing, they just sat with that experience with them. They had someone there. So that was an aspect that was really supported the nervous system of someone else. But in either case, it wasn't the need to have to do something to relax, to subdue by, let me just calm down. Although that that also can support us, there was something to just being with it that dehabituated, I don't know if that's a word exactly, the tendency and the momentum of fear that drives itself. It kind of moves forward in the cycle, and what it happens is by not feeding it, by reifying it, by having more narratives behind it, by just having someone else stay with it, allow that to abate enough to essentially create more tolerance within one's own body. And so what the Buddhas taught us 2,500 years ago was that just capacity to turn towards his fear allowed him, actually, we can imagine his nervous system to grow to accommodate something even more spacious around that fear. And fear had no hold on him anymore. And this, how many of you have seen this mudra by kind of like saints and other Buddhas? And you think this is palm up. Have you seen that? Might be here, there might be one here. And this is the Abaya Mudra. It's often very commonly seen in many ancient kind of representations and also saints. And if you've seen it, you probably kind of sense, what it kind of demonstrates is like some kind of blessing, protection, And essentially that is a gesture of fearlessness. Abaya means fear. So in the Pali and the Sanskrit, Bhaya was spoken often as this place of fear that is kind of built in. It comes into mind states as we kind of sit in meditation, or comes in reality, right? When we're feeling insecure about our own, what's going to happen to us, physical threats, the internal experience of what I might perceive as a threat. And Abaya is literally that you may have seen that cultural meme before, no fear. It's literally no fear. It's transcending fear. And so this mudra was a way to support, it was like also protection, a gesture of protection and security. And I find that really reassuring to me in a sense, because this place of how does one arrive at fearlessness? How does one arrive into this capacity to be with one's own, especially deeply embedded, large universal fears and threats like what we're facing right now in a pandemic, or the economic situation, the potential collapse, the crisis of our climate that's been present? How do we hold the fear of that and actually meet the moment? And what these practices remind me of, and with the mudra, it's like we actually have this opportunity to learn to harness this primal energy of fear, right? If we learn to be with it, it's actually showing us and revealing a whole new energetic of life force that's available. And fear hijacks us through the narratives that often lead to all forms of contraction, confusion in the mind, overwhelm, shutdown of our systems, our nervous systems learn to be shut down, And I think about this, I think you mentioned, in my bio is mentioned, I love sci-fi and fantasy. And so I'll give you some references from that world. There's a book and story many people might be familiar with if you have. It's called Dune. Anyone there, Dune people? Might have heard of it? Yeah. And so you might remember this line, but it really stuck with me when I thought about this this talk. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. And I wish I could have, if I had everything correct, I would be able to put this in the text and chat so you can also have it. But thank you, Julio. Fear is the mind killer. And that passage, I read this maybe 15 years ago or something. I'm like, it stuck to me. It's like, yeah, that feels something about that's right. It really, fear to me, as you might experience from the media, there's a contagion inside of it. I think, again, we look at survival level, fear as a signal probably worked really well in an empathetic tribal community, where if one person was able to actually feel fear, everyone's nervous system's like, oh, what do we need to be worried about? What do we need to get ready for, right? What do we need to adapt and react and respond to? It made a lot of sense as a community to turn and orient collectively with fear. So by nature, it's very contagious, is how I look at it. And then what that means for us is that because it's contagious in its own self, it has its own kind of, I use this very, hopefully compassionately, has its own viral transmission, fear itself, right? And how do we learn to protect our mind from that, right? There's a susceptibility that we have as a species to fear. And what it does, what scripts it creates, right? I love the comments, our brains need to be upgraded. And that's literally, this practice teaches us the opportunity to upgrade our functionality, right? We can actually be in relationship to our nervous system, right? This is where trauma theory, this epigenetics of like, how do we learn to respond and change this inherited function that we know is useful for our survival, and yet responding to everything like Jonesy the cat as in a fear way may not allow us to actually survive very long in the current climate, in the context. It doesn't lead to the most compassionate acts if we're responding only from fear, right? And so I was reflecting on, and you might reflect on this, but just take a moment to contemplate, what would be the opposite of fear that arises for you? Just recognize what for you is the opposite of fear. And to me, just looking this up on Quora, the website Quora, it said that if fear is a biological compulsion to avoid the perceived source of fear, whether object, person, situation, or action, then the opposite fear would be an emotion that allows us to draw one towards these things that we want to avoid. So in this case, the opposite would be curiosity, right? Learning to be curious and inquisitive. I really appreciate Tara Brach's kind of rain metaphor, right? To recognize and then to accept, right? To recognize and see. I see you, fear. The Buddha said, I see you, Mara. I see what's happening. I see the reality behind what is coming in the way, the obstruction. And then allowing to be there. I see you, fear. I'm not going to try to push you away. I'm not going to try to cram you away, move away from you in some other way. And then to investigate the I and rain. Investigate with kindness, curiosity. If we have the capacity, noticing for ourselves, do we have capacity to investigate right now? And then to nurture. Thinking about nurturing, I really think about, I went on a month long, my partner reminded me, James Baraz has this really beautiful saying, like, you don't want to have fear in the driver's seat. Not a very safe driver, Fear can be really unhealthy with the driver, but you do want to help fear feel safe, right? Bringing fear into the passenger seat, buckling fear up, putting a helmet on fear, hey, fear, it's going to be okay, right? Supporting and kind of letting it know it's okay to really, and again, another opposite of fear might be just safety, right? Can we be safe in ourselves right now? In our homes, in our bodies? Where can we find that safety in our minds? And James Baldwin said in The Fire Next Time, to defend oneself against fear is simply to ensure that one will one day be conquered by it. So fears must be faced. And with that, I want us to, and I'll say one more quote because I have a few. Paulo Freire says, the opposite of love is not as many times or most we often think is hatred, but the fear of love, the fear to love, and the fear to love is wait, hold on, maybe I didn't write this right. It's not hatred, but the fear to love, and the fear to love is the fear of being free, right? So again, this relationship between love and fear. Love softens us, while fear hardens us. Love opens the universe. Fear isolates us in ourself. And with that, I want to ask my comrades to help me with this breakout room. I'm going to put a question here. And this is an opportunity to be in community in Sangha. And if you feel slightly fearful or averse to that, it's okay. I want to give accommodations. You might just journal about this, but we'll be breaking out into dyads, potentially somewhat a triad, and you'll have about 2.5, 3 minutes each to just talk about these particular questions. I'm going to put them in the chat box right now, and then people will break out into dyads. How do I experience fear and uncertainty in my body? What are the sensations I feel? What are the thoughts in my mind? And what are the behaviors? And then two, what supports me in being with my own fear and uncertainty? How do you nurture? I hope that was useful for so many. We want to turn it over to the Sangha for this next piece. You have an opportunity to share anything that might have been insightful, briefly to share, remembering the multicultural agreements about sharing space and allowing for a room, so maybe being lean. You might want to share something that was insightful for you, speaking from your own statement, maybe not for your partner. And then also, if you have any questions, we might pose, and I'll see if I have an answer. I might have something, more of a question to come back towards. I love the technique my partner shared to just verbalize, I feel fear out loud, and to bring it into the room. I feel fear. Mm-hmm. Makes me think about this quote by a psychologist, David Fishman. Says, fear is the most difficult emotion to handle. You can cry pain, you can scream anger, but fear is docked silently in your heart. And so to be able to give fear a voice, I feel fear, or I see you fear, be such an antidote. Thank you. Yeah, it sounds like some people are saying, yep. That's a good comment. And I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think we understand that when something as intense as fear, we experience it on a brain level, right? That our limbic system kind of center kind of lights up, right? That response, it was what prompts our fight, flight, and freeze kind of trauma response. And so when the limbic system's operating, you might remember, some people might remember, like, to flip your lid, the prefrontal cortex comes off, right? The executive functioning. But a really, I think, really cool strategy that some of us have developed, I think is very sophisticated, is like we could still like intellectualize it, because it's hard to let the body really experience the fear, because there's a physiological thing happening, right? And that might be overwhelming. And that's why it's so valuable, I think, in my experience, is to help prime my nervous system to like come back to the body. These basic practices we were doing in the beginning, like what sensations can I track right now? What can I orient to my senses to allow the body to be pinged with our own awareness, so that the nervous system gets to track not from the mind up, but rather the body, mind down, body up, rather. Hope that was helpful. Some people have a lot of good thoughts too. Mm-hmm. And while we wait, I'll say another quote by one of my heroes, Thich Nhat Hanh, who says, this quote is, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms and pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But even if one person on the boat remained calm and centered, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. And again, this aspect of, fear is contagious, so is calm, right? Our nervous systems are linked together. So anyone that's been an educator, or anyone that's kind of been in a room, you kind of know, it's like, if that teacher, if you as an educator are kind of, as the person that has probably likely the most positionality of power, as well as a nervous system that is kind of being the center of gravity, start to feel anger, animosity, uncertainty, anxiety, that starts to enact a whole momentum of domino effects to your young people, right? And so that be able to hold that practice within our own bodies, to be a kind of calm anchor, stabilizing our own feelings, you start to naturally, our empathy kind of naturally kind of allows other people to sink into that. And the mirror neurons allow us to kind of lock into, oh, okay, someone else is calm, that you kind of borrow each other's nervous system. And I think that's one of the most beautiful parts of where we can learn to understand how the neurobiology of this plays out. I have the opposite. It becomes full body immersion unless I'm not the one in fear. Then I stop, watch, and help if I can. Yeah, body goes into panic mode. I have a lot of compassion for that. When I'm doing the intellectualization thing, and I notice in my body, I personally start to shift my gaze rapidly, like I'm tracking and looking for something. And body, mind, things happen simultaneously, and my mind tends to get louder. That's really, really good noticing. One thing I might really recognize like that. What for me that brings up is the kind of like the the hypervigilant kind of tracking like that when fear states come in, right? And again, Jonesy the cat does it often, right? What we can do is actually kind of from a somatic theory aspect, trauma learning, we can actually support our nervous systems by purposely orienting as a based in practice. So for example, you might look around, and you can do that anytime and just notice 4 or 5 objects, particularly things that are colorful, things that are calming, neutral, pleasant even, things that bring you joy. Just looking around, giving yourself a chance to look and see, and then hear. What things can you hear? And then giving your opportunity to your senses to actually orient consciously, because right now that's happening unconsciously or subconsciously rather. It helps your body kind of come back, okay, am I safe right now? You're kind of giving your brain and body the conscious permission. Let me actually assess actual risk and threat in front of me. When I name my fear, I generally breathe and quickly find ways to understand all the reasons to feel joy, like I say I'm healthy. Look at the sunlight. Is that running away from fear? It's an interesting question. I think it would be an interesting experiment. Just let yourself, when you notice that fear, what else happens? If you can, in a sense, kind of be with the, common thing that we have as humans, we move away from things that are unpleasant, understandably, right? And so fear often is stimulating unpleasant experiences. And so it can be potentially for some of us, I bypass to look at gratitude and joy immediately, right? I'm not saying it is necessarily in your case, but I think just to track, like, is the sensation of fear or the unpleasantness able to actually be felt in the body? And in order to meet that, are we kind of orienting back to joy? Because I think orienting to joy and pleasure is extremely relevant right now. I do that every walk I go. Where can I see beauty around me, right? And so there's a wisdom inside of that too. So I would just kind of play with your edges, see how much of this fear can I sit with, and how much can I orient to the beauty and joy, and find gratitude and find that tension in yourself. I have been struggling with fear, particularly this week with the murder of Ahmad and Bree. I had successfully compartmentalized the fear of being shot while black, the police incidents. But now activities I enjoy daily, like sitting in my apartment or going for a run, a bike ride, now have so much fear attached. I'm looking forward to applying these insights. Thank you so much, Bridget, for acknowledging, bringing that reality in. Just holding so much compassion for the folks that are the most vulnerable right now, particularly Black bodies, brown bodies that are really under threat, have been for hundreds of years, and how that fear is something that is so deeply woven, and I don't feel quite equipped to even respond. I really appreciate your practice in that. So in this tradition, as practice, we come together, and there's this generosity for ourselves that we can hold this opportunity that we take in to come to cultivate some more awareness and wisdom, some gathering of our own kind of hearts and minds together in this way. And then we, with this opportunity, we recognize that there's so many in this world that can use this. And so this merit that we can bring and cultivate for ourselves is not just for us, but it's for all those beings. May all beings be touched by this opportunity to be able to face and sit with their fear, to have tea with their fear, to be able to find security and safety, to be touched by the wisdom of heart and love. May all beings be able to transcend fear and know what safety and love fully is. It's a pathway to freedom. so much.